So we are creating big magic. We're creating big magic all month. And what does it take to create big magic? Sweat. Sweat, that's what it takes. Never giving up. You know, we talked about it at the beginning of the month. What does it take? Well, we have to master our fear. We have to master our fear. And then we have to experience that sense of self that we are, and we have to give ourselves permission to be who we are. Sometimes these are tall orders, are they not? Sometimes a little scary, it's a little challenging, and we're not always exactly sure how to do it, especially when it feels like we start to go for it, and then boom! We get slapped down. Something happens. And we say, oh, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing. I don't know if I should be doing this. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what's going on. Oh my gosh. So the last piece of it we're talking about this morning is never giving up. The persistence that it takes, the sweat. And as Reverend Karen said, the sweat equity. We're putting a lot of sweat equity into this building. We put a lot of sweat equity into this building 10 years ago. Are we willing to put sweat equity into our own lives? So I've really been, Reverend Karen is right. I threatened, I'm just going to read them the chapter. If they're not reading the book, I'm just going to read the chapter to them. Okay, well, it could take a little longer than I have. So I've really been inspired by this book. I hope you are too. And of course, I'm trusting that as you've been reading along, you realize that this isn't just about being an artist, right? It isn't just creating big magic in art, but we understand ourselves as creative beings, and that our life is our art. And if we want to create big magic, if we want to create the magic of our spirituality in our lives, if we want to create the magic of our maturing, if we want to create the magic of the passion that we have in our hearts, these things apply to all of us, right? Not just in this particular idea of artistic talent or artistic endeavor. And yet it is a fabulous opportunity for us to really explore, how do I build a life that works for me? A creative, empowering life that works for me, and a world that works for everyone. So, this chapter talks about one of my favorite things. She calls it persistence. Persistence. We might call it perseverance. Some people call it suffering. Go to work every day. I go to work every day. I do the thing every day. Okay, this is not martyrdom. This is not suffering. Persistence, perseverance. I have long made friends with this. I call this sustained effort. Now, this isn't the trying to force something to happen or make something happen. This is the sustained effort that says every time I fall down, I'm going to get up. And all that matters is that I get up one more time than I fell down, right? That's how we all learned how to walk. We all knew how to do this as children. We were very persistent. We were very persistent in learning how to walk, learning how to talk, learning how to ride our bicycles, learning how to do all kinds of things. And we didn't do any of them well when we started out. But we just kept at it. We just kept at it. This persistence, this sustained effort. And again, I want to be very clear. This is not martyrdom. This is not suffering. This is the willingness to keep at it. Now, we've had lots of books written in the last few years, Outliers and Grit, and lots of books that talk about this. And sometimes it seems to me, even in our spiritual communities, we need to talk about this a little bit. We have a tendency to want everything to be just with ease and grace. Just with ease. And we can say that if it's not easy, it's not ours to do. If it's suffering, it's not ours to do. But that doesn't mean it doesn't require effort. Sustained effort, the willingness to sweat. I learned about this, the place that I learned about this years ago when I moved to Seattle, I learned about this mountain climbing. You do a lot of sweating mountain climbing. You do a lot of sweating, a lot of panting, a lot of, really? I voluntarily chose to do this? What was I thinking? And yet, there's that joy, whether it's mountain climbing, whether it's golfing, whether it's swimming, whether it's simply continually showing up. There's something so amazing about experiencing the accomplishment when we don't give up. Elizabeth Gilbert says this: it's a simple and generous rule of life that whatever you practice, you will improve. Well, let's see. I gave up on the clarinet. I gave up on the violin. I gave up on the piano because every time I would go back to the teacher, what did she say to me? Did you practice this week? No. And, of course, what happened? I didn't get any better, did I? And she didn't like it, and I didn't like it, and finally, I gave up because I wasn't practicing. It's a simple and generous rule. Think about that, how generous the universe is. That whatever you practice, you will improve. And so that's what these many books that have been written recently talk about. Outliers, 10,000 hours, sort of the average amount of hours that it takes to become really great at something. Now, there are actually chess masters who mastered chess and are now chess masters in 6 months. Well, there are others that took hundreds of thousands of hours to become masters. But there is something about this notion that we continually persist, that we practice. But part of practicing is learning, is being coached or being taught. Oh, well, that didn't work. Let's try something new. It's not just the same thing over and over and over again. So I remember when I was in ministerial school, I remember having a teacher say, well, you know, you can have a career, you can work at a job for 30 years and improve and move up the ladder and do all of those things, or you can work the same year 30 years in a row. Yeah, wow. So if our life looks exactly the same year after year after year after year, we may talk the talk, we may read the books and go to class and come on Sunday mornings and have all of that. And yet if it's the same year over and over and over again, our practice is not educating us. We're not inviting the learning process that's going on. So Elizabeth Gilbert talks about it like this. She said when she first started, she wasn't very good at all of this. She said, I kept not getting published, which is a nice way of saying she kept getting rejected. I kept not getting published, but that was okay because I was getting educated. I was getting educated. The most important benefit of my years of disciplined, solitary work was I began to recognize the emotional patterns of my own creativity. I could see that there were psychological cycles to my own creative process and that these cycles were always pretty much the same. Aha, I learned to say, when I would inevitably begin to lose heart for a project just a few weeks after I'd enthusiastically begun it. This is the part of the process where I wish I'd never engaged with this idea at all. I remember this. I always go through this stage, she writes. Or this is the part where I tell myself that I'll never write another good sentence. It'll never be good enough. Oh, right. This is the part where I beat myself up for being a lazy loser. Do you see? We do these things. We move along the process. We move along toward our goal, and we are going to have these experiences. We're going to fall down. We're going to be rejected. We're going to work hard, and maybe it doesn't come out exactly the way we thought. Or maybe it's just another day of the same thing. And we have these opportunities for these thought processes to begin to emerge. And most likely, for most of us, they do. Well, I'm not good enough. Well, I'm not going to be able to do this. Well, this is stupid. Why in the world did I ever say that I was going to build this business or have a child or do whatever it is? Persistence, sustained effort, if we will allow it to teach us, it will teach us how to move through these moments. So again, I learned this hiking. Now, I have to admit I'm not a mountain climber. That whole idea of getting to the top, not so much. Not for me. That looks very steep, very high, and very dangerous. So I'm what's called a ridge walker, right? So I'm perfectly happy to go up and down, but I tend to go for long periods of time. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, when I first started hiking back in Seattle, I somehow got hooked up with a bunch of guys who were mountain climbers. And they were all for it. Go, boom, up the mountain. And they would scamper up the mountain, and I'd be back there. Of course, I was smoking 2 packs a day at the time, right? That didn't help. I was all of 18 years old, and I would find myself with my 50-pound pack on my back, going up the mountain going, this is stupid, I can't believe I said I was going to do this. Look at those people, they are leaving me behind. Don't they know how much I'm struggling? I'm working so hard. And what happened when I would do that? I would quit. I would turn around and go down because I talked myself out of it. Do you see? It actually wasn't the mountain, and it wasn't how hard it was. I talked myself out of it. So I'll never forget, longs past, this was one of these times, and they were like, okay, Petra, we're going to take you one more time, but you can't give up. You can't quit. You have to come with us. And we had agreed that we were going to go up over a small pass, down into a valley, and I was going to spend the day in the valley while these idiots climbed the mountain. But I had to get up and down over that pass, 2,000 feet up in less than 2 miles. That's pretty darn steep. 50 pounds, on the pack. And this was, 3rd or 4th time I was out. And I had begun to do some of this work. I was beginning to kind of get a clue, and I realized that I was about an hour into I was an hour into the hike. I was all alone. They were gone. And I was starting in on it. Can't believe I'm sweating. It's so hot. I can't believe I'm doing this again. Why in the world? And I thought, wait. If I know anything that I'm learning in this spiritual teaching, it is I have to pay attention to what I'm thinking. Right then and there is when I built my first gratitude practice. Every step, I thought of something to be grateful for. I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my life. I'm grateful to have found the center. I'm grateful that I'm out here. I'm grateful that it's sunny and not raining. I'm grateful that my pack is only 50 pounds and not 80 pounds. I'm grateful that whatever I could think of, I was every step. I was stunned to find myself at the top. I was surprised when I arrived. I had no idea I had covered so much ground just by being grateful. I went on to learn in these hikes. I learned it was not only the deepest practice for me for gratitude, it was also an extraordinary practice for me to learn how to be present in the moment. Because if all you're thinking about is how high and how hard it is to get there, that looks monumental. That's my experience. But I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and then I would stop, and I'd look around. Oh my God, look at the trees. There's a flower blooming. On every hillside, I found a flower. Around every corner, I found a tree, I found a stream, I found amazing rocks and clouds to look at. Climbing that mountain and learning about sustained effort and not giving up taught me how to practice the presence. how to be in the present moment and not anywhere else. Just right here. Not around the corner, not how hard it was going to be down the road, not how long it was going to take me to get to the top, not, oh my God, they're so far away, will I ever be able to catch them? But right here. Wow, right here, right here. Oh, that breeze is nice. I think I'll stop and have a little water. And do you know what was really amazing? What I discovered is no matter how fast they hiked and no matter how much I did my spiritual practice, after that I always made it. Always made it. And I was actually never that far behind them. But I didn't pay attention to that. I just never gave up. And I didn't allow those thoughts to anchor me, to pull me down. This is a part of that process of not suffering with our practice or the thing we're going for, not suffering, simply having sustained effort. So she goes on to say this. I love this part. This part made me laugh. Okay, she calls it fear in high heels. Remember we talked about fear? Okay, we talked about fear a couple weeks ago. She says, oh no, this is the wrong one. Wait a minute, I have to find my quote. I can't find my quote, doesn't matter. Okay, this is the bottom line. She says this, learning how to endure your disappointment and frustration is part of the job of a creative person. You see, our fear is partly our frustration made manifest. We're frustrated, it's hard. We think, and so we're afraid we're not going to make it. She goes on to say this, frustration is not an interruption of your process. Frustration is the process. I had to stop and really think about that one. Oh, no, I don't know. Frustration is the process. You know, I had to stop and think about that for quite a while. And then I thought, oh, because we're practicing how to move through things. Do you see? Having a creative life, deciding we're going to move from a spiritual point of view, doing our prayer work, living our passion, none of this says it's going to be a long, steady uphill climb into nirvana, although we'd certainly like it to be, right? But there are pebbles in the road, sometimes boulders, sometimes the road is washed out, sometimes there's a detour, sometimes it does not go as we thought it would. Sometimes we have those thoughts and we do get triggered. And then if we allow ourselves to become frustrated, what happens? We give up. Too much frustration and we stall out. But if we recognize frustration is simply an opportunity to practice. Do you see? It's just an opportunity to practice. What practice, what tool, what thing do I need right now to allow me to move through the frustration? Do I need to make friends with disappointment? I think I told you this story when we were talking about fear the very first week, talking to a young man, and he was so afraid to get going. And he said, I'm so afraid of being disappointed. Learning how to deal with disappointment is part of spiritual maturing. It is going to happen. People will disappoint us. Things won't work out exactly the way that we thought. But if we persist, do you see, they will work out. It's the getting caught in the frustration and saying, well, I'm just going to do it if it's easy. Ease and grace, everything ease and grace, ease and grace. And if it's not going to be easy, I'm not going to do it. Do you see? It should be ease and grace. But that is actually the grace with which we move through our frustration. Do you see? That is very different than I'm not going to do it unless it's easy and graceful. But we find that place of grace within us that allows us to know Spirit's got this. Spirit knows how to do this. The wisdom and intelligence of the universe is moving with me. Whatever it is, somehow I know good is going to come of this. Doesn't matter how many twists and turns. Every no means a yes. Every closed door means an open window. Do you see? Those are the things that we tell ourselves, and then we recognize that frustration is actually part of the process. And we are moving through it because we are persistent. And as we are persistent, we begin to discover this deep and profound truth about us. Our children have it, we had it when we were kids, this deep and profound truth. And that is that we are extraordinarily resilient. We are very resilient beings. Our hearts are resilient. Our minds are resilient. We are very resilient. And our resilience gets tested or gets seemingly disappears when we allow this kind of thinking to take us down the rabbit hole. So this is a woman. She did a bunch of studies, and she wrote about the getting through trauma, childhood trauma, and trauma even in an adult life. And she talks about the resilience. Not only the resilience of us, but actually the resilience of our brains, of the very brain process that we have. And she says it's simply this remembering that we can do this, that we did it as a child. She goes on to say this. In her practice, Graham encourages people to choose exercises that will help heal the psyche and the soul, thereby training themselves to transform a moment of criticism, a moment of upset, a moment of trauma, into one of self-acceptance. You can reframe a distressing event by remembering a time when you were confident and open. Say you mess up royally at work and are chastised by your boss. Rather than obsess over it, you should recall the praise you've received in the past and how good it made you feel. Then remind yourself that this one error is not a testament to the sum of your skills. Graham refers to these as sure I can moments that replicate the feeling a child has when attempting a new skill. You see, practice teaches us how to learn, and it teaches us resilience. Every time we play a wrong note, or we swing the golf club a wrong way, or we don't have quite the outcome, we can either give up and say, ugh, woe is me. That means there's something wrong with me, or the way that I'm doing it, or it's an opportunity to learn, to shift, to see something new, be something new, think something new about it. She goes on to say this. Beyond this sure I can moment, when the sense of our need to rebuild our resilience is very large, when our sustained effort is around something very big, she says this: instead of you can do this, the thinking shifts to you are big enough to hold this. You're big enough to hold this. You're big enough to hold the feelings that you're having. You're big enough to imagine the possibilities that might be coming down the pike. You're big enough to handle the details. You're big enough to hold the amount of work it's going to take. You're big enough to hold this. So do you see, this persistence that we're talking about is not a powering through. And it's not I'm going to force it and I'm going to make it happen. It's simply the practice of never giving up. And to never give up, we actually have to find something that moves us forward. We have to find our passion. We have to find that thing that we believe in, whether it's a thing we're going to do or a life that we want to lead or a longing that we have for God. and to experience a spiritually grounded, emotionally mature life. You see, our longing has to be stronger than our frustration. So not only is this book, The Outliers, there's also this other book that's new that's been out recently on grit. And so somebody in our community gave me this article. It comes out of the New York Times, and she's actually talking about this excessive obsession with the GPA in school. I had that. Actually, I was trained in that. I was a straight A student. Actually, I graduated with a 4.3 or some ridiculous thing like that, right? And I would bring home A's and then more A's and then more A's, and then I'd have a D in penmanship. All those people who've had to read my handwriting, sure enough, right? So I would come home with a D in penmanship, and then every once in a blue moon, I'd come home with a B. And do you know what we would discuss for the next day, week, or month? What happened? Why'd you bring home a B? What, were you not paying attention? What's the matter with you? You don't get Bs. This is, Never mind that I had just spent, I don't know how many report cards bringing home nothing but A's. Right? And so this idea that we move into something that our passion is not necessarily this achievement or accomplishment based on an outside idea. Actually, that outside idea can very much limit us. So in this idea of grit and character, which has been bannered around in our school systems now, this article is actually on the book that was written called Grit. And she says maybe it's not, again, just this blind, dogged, no matter what, I'm going to suffer through it. Duckworth, who's the author, notes that moral purpose also contributes to grit. People who are motivated more by altruism than personal pleasure score higher on the grit scales. She also notes that having a hopeful temperament contributes to perseverance. Most important, she notes that the quality of our longing matters. Gritty people are resilient and hardworking, sure, but they also, she writes, know in a very, very deep way what it is that they want. She goes on to say this, I don't know about you, but I'm really bad at being self-disciplined about things I don't care about. That's what turns persistence and sustained effort into suffering, is when we force ourselves to keep our nose to the grindstone about something we don't care about. So we have to actually find, what do we care about? And one of the challenges, it seems to me, is that many of us, what do we care about? The 10! I did it perfectly! Whatever it was. Score the 10. The perfect dinner, the perfect vacation, the perfect outcome, the perfect presentation, the perfect song, the perfect, right? And we're waiting for it. 10, anybody? You gonna give me a 10? You're not? Why bother? Why did I even bother? She says this, perfect is not only the enemy of the good, it is also the enemy of the realistic, the possible, and the fun. So again, we want to remember this persistence. This is not martyrdom. It's not sacrifice. And part of what causes it to fall into suffering is this notion that we have that perfect is we have to get a 10 in everything. Actually, we call that perfectionism. Perfectionism. Perfectionism is that which, kills more projects than anything you can imagine. Perfectionism is our fear masquerading. Perfectionism is our fear that says, well, it's not perfect yet, so it's not complete. It's never done. It's never finished. Because there's always more to tweak, always more to do, always a little better, always a little something, always something more to make sure we get that perfect 10. So we never complete things. We never actually come all the way through to completion. We just give up. I will not ask you how many unfinished projects you have in your drawer, on your computer, or in your heart and mind. Because why bother? Why finish? Or we drive ourselves like slave drivers for that last little bit, as if somebody's going to raise up a scorecard and give us a 10. Now, the other side of that coin is that people are very astonished sometimes. They will say to me, well, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not a perfectionist at all. How can I be a perfectionist and never do anything? I'm a procrastinator. And we are stunned to discover that perfectionism in its most challenging form is actually called procrastination. Because why? Because in perfectionism we don't finish. In procrastination we don't even start. Because we know it's not going to be good enough. Why bother? We know it's not going to get a 10. We know we really are not that good at it, or whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. Whatever the story is that we have. So not only do we not finish, we simply don't start. So part of this persistence, part of this process of persistence and moving forward and never giving up, this is something I've learned many, many years ago, and it has stood me in such good stead. Note to self, good enough is the new perfection. Good enough. Now, how many of you, when I say good enough, go, well, no, it's not. Well, it's not excellent. It's not perfect. Good enough. Well, good enough's just getting by. Good enough is just slouching. Good enough is just like, well, you're barely making it. Okay, what part of good enough is not clear? It's good enough. It's good. It's good. It's actually good. It's not fair. It's not so-so. It's not just barely over the line. It's good. And it's enough. And we have this weird thing that we think good enough means barely or sort of or slacking or I don't know what it is, because we're perfectionists and we're looking for the 10, the all A's. Persistence and never giving up and allowing ourselves to actually complete things or even starting them in the first place is to make friends, deep friends with good enough. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't occasionally times where we do actually work for something that is very excellent. And yet, even excellence is actually good enough because it's not perfect. It's not perfect. And so, to really have an idea and an understanding of this notion of good enough, she goes on to quote her mother. And her mother said, "Done is better than good." Good without done is nothing. Yes? Right? That great manuscript or that wonderful idea or that good thing that you're going to do but's never been completed, that's nothing. Good done is better than good. You do what you can as competently as possible within a reasonable time frame, and then you let it go. You let it go. You don't keep tweaking it in every last little bit, and you don't keep taking it back and going, wait, it's not finished yet. Oh, no, it's not good enough. Yes, actually it is. It's good enough because it's the best you can do at this particular moment. And what will happen? We will learn. We will grow, right? We'll be educated by whatever comes back. We'll experience something, but we will have contributed to our own lives instead of being paralyzed or finding ourselves frozen or running around in 7 different directions or not being able to decide this. I'm moving in this direction. This is the path I'm going to take. And so when we think about this persistence, this never giving up, what allows us to move into that is that we have to find that thing that we are longing for, or that is longing to come through us, as us. It is very challenging to be self-disciplined about things that we don't care about. Hence, I don't go to the gym. Not big into weights. I don't really care about the treadmill, not so excited about the elliptic thing. I don't really get the whole TV everywhere. Oh no, no. Give me a hike, give me a road out in the woods. I'm good, I'll walk on it all day long. You see, we are able to be self-disciplined about those things that matter to us. So we actually have to discover, what is it that we're passionate about? What is that we are longing for? And it doesn't have to be a thing like a novel, or it could be that we want to contribute or create in a certain way. It could be just creating a life that works for us. It could be creating deeper spiritual understanding how to apply spiritual principles to our life. Do you see? But we actually have to long for it enough. Maybe we just have to long for not having our crazy thinking run us anymore. We have to long for it enough so that we have the self-discipline to commit to it. She actually starts this chapter with talking about a vow she made to herself. When I was about 16 years old, I took vows to become a writer. I mean, I literally took vows. The way a young woman of an entirely different nature might take vows to become a nun. Of course, I had to invent my own ceremony around these vows because there was no official holy sacrament for a teenager who longs to become a writer. But I used my imagination and my passion, and I made it happen. My vows were strangely specific, and I would still argue pretty realistic. I didn't make a promise that I would be a successful writer because I sensed that success was not under my control. Nor did I promise that I would be a great writer because I didn't know if I could be great. Nor did I give myself any time limits for the work, like, well, if I'm not published by the time I'm 30, I'll give up on this dream and go find another line of work. In fact, I didn't put any conditions or restrictions on my path at all. My deadline was never. Instead, I simply vowed to the universe that I would write forever, regardless of the result. I promised that I would try to be brave about it and grateful and as uncomplaining as I could be. I also promised that I would never ask writing to take care of me, but that I would always take care of it, meaning that I would always support us both by whatever means necessary. I just wanted to spend my life as near as writing as possible, forever close to that source of my curiosity and contentment. And so I was willing to make arrangements needed to be made in order always to write. So you were given a piece of paper when you came in, an opportunity to think about your vow. Now, this is not a vow that you have to make a living at. It's not a vow that you have to spend 8 hours a day at. But this is the thing that you vow never to give up on. This is the longing that you have in your own life that calls you. So the greeters are coming forward. If you don't have a card, you can raise your hand. They're going to give you one. Make sure you have a pen. If you need one, you can raise your hand. Do you see? I want to read this to you again. I didn't make a promise that I would be successful, nor did I promise that I would be great. nor did I give myself time limits. I didn't put any condition or restrictions on my path. I just wanted to spend my life as near to this passion as possible. Whether it's a lifetime passion or just a passion of what's up in our lives right now, the next few months, the next year, could be a lifetime. That longing to which you will be self-disciplined, that is important enough that you will be persistent and have sustained effort around. So I'd like for you to just close your eyes for a moment if you haven't started writing, and just feel into that. And if you know what that is, write down, I vow to spend 30 minutes caring for myself, loving God, being about the children, saving the planet, whatever it is. I vow, because this is important to me and my life and creating the life of my dreams, my life. Not for a perfect score, not for anybody's approval or permission. I vow. And so, as we bring your writing to a close, I think it's really important to give ourselves permission to be good enough at whatever it is that we vow to. You know, as I was writing this talk and I was really thinking about this, I vowed to be a minister when I was 17 and a half years old. That's when I took this vow, that I would be a minister. Lots of bumps along the way, bruises, lots of flames, and crash and burn, lots of exquisitely powerful moments, lots of demonstrations. And you know, when I took that vow, I didn't say to myself, I'm going to be another Michael Beckwith. I didn't say, I'm going to be as famous as Marianne Williamson. I didn't worry about whether or not we have 500 or 5,000 people coming on a Sunday morning. You see, I simply vowed to do the ministry that I have to do. And as Reverend Karen read, we get those testimonials every week. Somebody's life has been changed. Somebody's life has been transformed. Last year, I'd received a card from a woman who was in my first community in Renton, Washington, 25 years ago. And she wrote me, and she said, you have no idea what coming to your community for 6 months meant to me, and how that has been the anchor for the last 25 years of my life. And I just wanted you to know. Do you see? That is good enough. And what you have to offer is just as good and important. And sometimes we hold up to ourselves Jesus and Gandhi and, you know, these very outrageously successful, whatever it is in our field or this or that, and we say, well, if I can't be that, I'm not going to do it. Or what's the point? The point is that there is a power and a presence moving as you in the world. It is the longing of your heart to be the fullest expression of life that you can be. Go be it. Never give up.